And it matches what Jesus said. John's gospel, John, the disciple that Jesus loved, said this. He recorded this that Jesus spoke. In this world you will have difficulty, but don't give up, for I have overcome the world. A good word that still applies to us today. There are Christians today that are experiencing great persecution, loss, and pain. When I read Revelation, I'm always remembering just what I was taught in my early years about the Great Tribulation is only going to last for 7 years. And if you look around the world, if we look beyond America, the suffering and the struggle for Christians in some countries seems never ending. And a thought that I have occasionally is it ironic that our American tendency is to go for the easy button, the easy path, the easy way to avoid suffering and pain in this life? Isn't it so like us to say the suffering will only be 7 years? At the time of John, there was literally an underground church in Rome. The believers weren't safe to gather to meet like this in public in the morning, in the daylight. And so under the city were the catacombs, the cemetery, if you will. The Romans were very superstitious, and so they didn't go there. And so the Christians were free to meet there. And that was the safe place for them, literally underground. So as history moved forward, when there were times of tribulation and testing, whenever Christians had to go into hiding, it was said to become the underground church. In various countries, there's underground movements. During World War II, there was an underground resistance in France. Well, the underground church happened in China in homes. The public church suddenly allocated locations. Everybody that was willing to host became a gathering place. And so the million believers, the million people who had faith in Christ spread out, went local, went into their neighborhoods, and grew. After years and years of persecution and suffering, when suddenly things kind of opened up a little bit in the 80s and 90s, there was a count in the year 2000 that the million believers had now become 50 million believers in China. Jesus and his influence did not disappear. It was just invisible for a time. They learned endurance. They learned how to be the church without having a church. Today, update that a little bit. Some of the recent persecution in China has been while there's a state-allowed church. About 10 years ago, they went along and they sawed off all the crosses. Any steeple that had a cross, any sign that had a cross, they were cut off. They were allowed to be a gathering place, but they couldn't have that symbol. And in 2020, the number of believers in China is about 110 million. They continue to grow, and their tribulation has lasted 75 years. There's some who say that given that exponential multiplication, in a few years, maybe in the next 20 years, China could reach around 300 million believers in Christ, and that's almost more people than we have in our whole country. We are still the most Christian nation in the world, but China, with billions and billions of people, is soon to have more believers than we have citizens in our own country. And that's under great duress and under great pressure and under great suffering. So why do I share this with us? Part of the reason is that our brothers and sisters in Christ are struggling in some countries of the world. Each week I'm going to give a little update of where that struggle is still happening, and I would invite you to pray for them. The Church Universal refers to believers in Christ wherever they're located, past and present, alive, and those who have gone on to be with Christ. The Church Universal, our brothers and sisters in Christ, are having a hard time in some places around the world.